All right, ladies and gentlemen and juggalos. I don't know if I could express it as such. Joining us is a writer and co-writer and director of Off Ramp 2023. Thank you for joining us and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward
Yeah.
to talk about the film.
Thanks for being here.
Yes. Yeah. So when we spoke with Jared Jenkins, who plays Scarecrow, just an amazing dude, just down to earth, very cool. And we briefly talked about Opera because it hadn't been out yet, and so there wasn't a whole lot of questions for us to really ask him about it. But trying to keeping an eye on it, I felt like this was something really up Tyler's alley, and so he had a chance to watch it first. And when he gave his glowing review, I was like, all right, here's my turn. I don't have a lot of time to fit in a lot of movies, but on Tyler's kind of review and as a recommendation, I thought I'd give it a shot and I had a good time. You may not have heard this comparison, but it's kind of a serious version of Dumb and Dumber. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
sure.
road trip.
Awesome.
You got some shenanigans. And also listeners and viewers, this will contain spoilers too. Can you please share like you guys conceptualizing this story? How did you guys come up with the story? What was the inspiration for it?
Well, thanks so much, man. Yeah, it is. I mean, definitely, I love Dumb and Dumber. It made me laugh for sure. I've watched that movie a lot of times. Big gulps, huh? And I wouldn't say that that was necessarily one of the inspirations, but I would certainly wouldn't deny its influence in my life, you know. But yeah, the kind of all started with just a weird image. You know what I mean? It's like Juggalos were kind of like in the zeitgeist around the time that like in the early 2010s and stuff. Vice was doing a lot of stuff on it. There was Workaholics did an episode. There was just kind of like a lot of juggalos around. And I watched this one documentary called American Juggalo, and it was the first time I had seen the Juggalo family love element and the kind of fact that like a lot of these folks really found community amongst each other, and that it was just that the Insane Clown Posse thing was kind of like just it kind of was just kind of coincidental in a way, right? It's just kind of a thing. They just ended up liking it, and then these folks found this greater connection as a result of it. And I don't know, it just was really touching to me and really interesting. And just I had this really crazy image. And since we're gonna do spoilers and whatever, the image I had was the two juggalos with their face paint on, with blood in their face, holding a baby that they had just cut out of a pregnant woman who had just died, and they'd saved the life of the baby, and they were the heroes, and that they were like singing miracles, because of the song Miracles. So that was really it. Like that was the kind of image that started the whole thing, and it was always like, how do you get to that? And I had written like a short version of it, and then I had kind of like thought I was going to do a short film, but then I was like, man, if I'm going to like cut a baby out of a stomach, I mean, might as well just do a feature because it's going to be a big expense. And so my co-writer and I, Tim, we started working on it at a certain time, and we worked on it for quite a long time. I'm also like a gaffer, or was a gaffer. And actually, that's how I met Jared first, because I was a gaffer of a TV show called The Purge, and I did both seasons of that. And anyway, so I was always like busy, right? I wrote the script, but then I would go back to work, and kind of like life gets in the way. So it took quite a long time until like the pandemic. And once the pandemic happened, kind of like had some time. We all had time to sit around and think. And I was like, man, I have this script. I'd really just like to make it. So we went through many, many versions of the script. But the thing that never ever changed was that it was Juggalos, their names were Trey and Silas, and that they ended at that wooded, crazy climax.
Well, you mentioned Trey and Silas. Let's start with kind of those names and those two characters. Are they based off of any ones that you know? Typically we hear writers write things that they know.
Yeah, I mean the name like Silas was definitely named after a guy who there was a name in a Juggalo documentary. I think it was even an American Juggalo. They just I think it was this couple and they were like, "Oh, my baby's name is Silas," and just I also grew up with a kid named Silas. It sometimes like I had a friend, so it was like kind of one of those things that like just kind of connected, and it's like this kind of bizarre biblical name too. Like it's such an old school weird biblical name that it always like stuck with me. So just when I heard it in the Juggalo documentary, I was just like, oh, that's definitely a character. And then Trey, as far as a name, coming down here in the South, I live in New Orleans and we made the film down in New Orleans. There's always kind of this thing of this nickname of Trey. It's very common, especially for like thirds. So like if somebody is a third in a line, not junior, but the third, they'll call him Trey, like the French for
Mm,
three. And so that was kind of always like it's just like one of those things. It's very like there's a lot of trays, down here in the South, and like, so anyway, those names. But as far as like who they were, I mean, yeah, they're all kind of amalgamations of a bunch of people. They a lot of versions. Like one of my best friends, he and I have a certain banter, so I certainly like stole a lot of his like colloquial sayings for Silas. And I always look at myself as like a Trey. Like I feel like Trey is kind of like the sort of he's sort of the point of view of the movie. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like
mhm.
sort of seen through his eyes, although it kind of switches to Silas towards the end of the movie. But just like I guess I kind of always see Trey as because of the voiceover and the sort of perspective that it was kind of like his sort of like version of it. So that's kind of what I always like put myself into. But yeah, they're both amalgamations of a lot of things. And then Tim and I, my co-writer, I mean, we both put like tidbits of characters we know, and Tim and I always joke too, so it's probably a little bit of both of us in there as well. But we, just take a little bit of everything and just start putting them in. But it always kind of started from that kind of like Laurel and Hardy aspect, right? Like you have the kind of wild man. There's actually it's funny. There's actually a book that Eric Idle wrote that he was about these clowns, like these outer space clown. I can't remember the name of it right now, but anyway, he describes it as the red nose and the white face, and the red nose being the like over the top, kind of character, the white face being the straight man. So I've always kind of like seen kind of comedy dynamics like working well like that. So Silas was kind of the wild card, and Trey's sort of the straight man, but they both have amazing lines and are hilarious.
100%. I especially love Silas's full name, Silas Elton Devereaux. And so, you mentioned Nola, and so it's like so I can see the French influence in Devereaux. I have a special place in my heart, for those that tune into Twisted Metal. I feel like I've shared before that I had served in the Oregon National Guard and we were part of the Hurricane Katrina efforts. And so
Thank you.
there had been soldiers displaced and also came up here. And so I had a little bit of connection, and that's also why Twisted Metal covering it and kind of seeing parts of it is it's really, really nice to kind of see. And I just enjoy seeing that as a backdrop in off front. Um the Tyler, do you have any questions before I can continue?
Oh, so I guess you said that you kind of like had the idea around like 2010, or at least like started the script. Uh, when was it when you kind of knew that like, oh, this is actually happening? We're gonna be able to make this.
Yeah, good question. So, after kind of the pandemic was, like it certainly somewhere in the middle of like 2020, we, started going back to work in the movies. Again, like I said, I was a gaffer and I was on a TV series actually called Queen Sugar that was shooting down here.
Mm.
And so I went like it was kind of one of these things. We came, work started happening a little bit. And I had made a decision at that point, like, okay, I'm gonna make the film. And I gave myself like a deadline. Like I was like, I'm gonna finish this season and I do one more or something like that. I forget exactly what I did, but something like that. And I said, okay, I'm just gonna like do this, make a little money, with the eye on that in the near future. And so I think we initially planned to shoot in November of 21, but we had some difficulties with casting, and we ended up like pushing the shoot and until January of 22, which is what we ended up with. And it was like such a weird thing because it was still like COVID and whatever, and all these like kind of there's all these rules about COVID with movie making and SAG rules and stuff. So you just had to whatever. So John Oswald, who plays Trey, like basically like 2 weeks before the shoot, he calls me and he's like, "Hey, I got COVID." I'm like, "Okay, well, I guess it's good that you got it now." I'm like, "That's good. We got just enough time, whatever." I was like, man, I wish I could get COVID right now. I was like, I don't want to, because I'm like, the thing is, it's like we have this tiny shoot, we're a small, very independent like production of just like, and so, any massive like time suck like that would just, it just hurt us a lot. You're already up against it doing an independent film, you know what I mean? Like say the Twisted Metal show, they certainly had, the comforts of a larger budget, so that if things happen, you can fix it. I see one of the issues with you when you're on low budget, you're like, if when issues come, you're like, you don't have the extra money to sort of fix it. So anyway, this long story short, I ended up getting COVID, and it was actually perfect. Even though I had to like spend Christmas alone, like quarantined, away from the family. In the end, it was the best thing because then we were able to start it in January 22, and then we had lots of obstacles as well. We had lost locations, we had lost footage, we had like all kinds of complications. We had to do reshoots and whatnot, but we knew we were making something that was kind of really unique and was really kind of saying something, we all felt really strongly about what we were talking about and felt that it was worth being out there in the world. And so, it was worth going back to it. And it was like, it was really just to kind of, I basically saved money and asked some family members, and it was, really pretty, it was all self-funded, so it was just kind of a family affair in a lot of ways.
I mean, it,
Yeah.
it shows just like it does not feel like a, oh, got this idea on a whim, let's go, see how it goes.
Yeah.
You can feel that the heart's there.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
absolutely. It's absolutely there. I haven't watched a ton of movies this year. Maybe a handful. I This is like one of the most funnest movies I've seen this year.
Oh, thank you
And
very much.
yeah, you mentioned like the indie feel. You really feel it, but stylistically, it's just visually stunning. I
Thank you.
recommended it to three people, three coworkers today, and they all like that sounds great. They're like, what it's about? I go, well, it's like like the road trip in Dumb and Dumber, and they're juggalos, but it's not about the juggalo culture, and like you really learn that family is more than just the people that you're related. It was really hard for me to describe, but I'm like, look, just watch it. If you can't get into like the first 15 minutes, it's probably not for you. And so I loved how you say how unique it is because that's what I appreciated about it. And going in completely blind, and Tyler's, review of, watch it on family movie night if you're the type of family that likes to talk about buttholes. Like I was like, okay, I'm sold on whatever that means. And so I had a good time. I sent Tyler a clip. I was watching the part where Silas goes to meet Trey at the prison and immediately I was in. I was like, I think it's the best, pick me up at prison um scene I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you very much.
It came out of nowhere with the rapping, and so we're slowly gonna learn that they both rap. Pray we find out a little bit later. But I just love how these two they love each other, and even
Mm.
when you think that Prey's gonna bust Silas's balls or something, we'll say, "Yo, that's fucking dope," or whatever it is. Like when they're coming up with the names for the band or the group, I was just like, those guys are just really lovable and they feel so real. You talked about like complications with casting. Was there a character that was difficult or challenging to cast? Like, if you were trying to find a particular tone?
Yeah, I mean, casting Silas is a real challenge. You know what I mean? To find, obviously Scott Turner Schofield, who plays Silas, is a trans man, and it was very important for us that when we wrote the fact that Scott, that Silas was a trans character, it became very important to us to find, an actual trans man who could give us some, not only to authenticate the performance and to, be do the right thing, do what was is necessary for the part. But also because we wanted to make sure if we were doing this that, that we had it right. and we know that we are only writing it from our perspective, and so it necessitates another perspective, a perspective of someone who could actually live this and understand this character. And really, it was just the complications of casting were really just, some things, just things happened, fell through, schedules, whatever. But the thing, and what happened was it all worked out for a reason, because in the end, having Scott and John be those characters is like so perfect, because their chemistry is amazing. And I'm so grateful for the casting problems. Listen, there's one of the things about that I learned so much about during this film is that every obstacle is an opportunity. And the fact of the matter is, we had a lot of obstacles, but at every one of those obstacles, things got better. And I would have never thought that at the time. And it only took like going through it and looking back to really do that, to see the truth of that. So even though it was hard to deal with some of the struggles in finding those characters, the end result is so amazing, and I can't imagine the characters as anyone else. And so when we finally met Scott, it was it was real, because John is a friend of my co-writer Tim's, Tim also wrote a movie called Low Life with some of his buddies from AFI. It's great. You'd love it. It's grimy. It's super cool. And but anyway, Johnny is in Low Life. So when we kind of Johnny was a bit of a known quantity, you know what I mean? We knew he knew he could deliver. And then when we met Scott, it was like, perfect, because Scott is also like an activist, and like he's very involved in like the community, but like he saw right through and saw exactly what we were going for. And what he loved so much about Silas as a character is that, yes, Silence, that there's the fact that Silas is trans is like this detail about his life, but that's all it is. It's a small detail. The movie doesn't revolve around that. The movie doesn't really like, yes, there is a shift in the movie because you recognize what has happened and how deep their friendship is. And I think that's the magic trick we were able to pull off, is to be able to talk about that, that kind of how deep a friendship can be, and do it with, such a one moment. But again, it's what Scott was so attracted to about Silas was just that it was like a detail about his life, and that he's like, because as trans folks, they have adventures and friends, and they have this whole life, and this is just one detail about their life, and that's Silas. And he's just such a great and wacky character that he also saw the like potential for that, and he's brilliant in it. And they, again, their chemistry is just out of this world. And of course, and then also with Eden as well, with Ashley Smith, she just kind of like rounds out that like trio. And again, and then playing counter to my good friend Jared Bankins from Twisted Metal, that he has such an incredible foil and heel of a bad guy. He just does it so great. We knew when we cast, he was one of those guys that, like, it was very early on when we saw his tape, and we were like, oh yes, this is right.
I just reshared Jared's I think that was his self-tape, if I'm not mistaken, of
Oh
him,
yeah.
yeah, kind of going over some lines. And that self-tape doesn't do it justice, but when he says allegedly, like on screen, I laughed so hard. It was cute because like the tension was built up, like leading into meeting Scarecrow. And the first time we see him, he's like, stretching out his leg and stuff like that, very comedic. Where I'm like, what's going on here? But then he comes out in the wheelchair and just gives this like this look, and you're like, this about to go down. Like you don't know what's gonna happen. But then it was like allegedly. I'm like, this movie is way too fun right now. And so I love that you guys kind of set the tone really early on. Um, I would watch like a prequel sequel of Silas in the past year
Mm.
since Trey's been in prison. I want to know how he got that confidence to go up on stage, because I'm thinking like that scene in the trainer, I think, where
Mhm.
he gets up and performs. I'm like, that's commitment. And like I don't know if I can see anybody else other than Scott doing that performance. And I love that Trey's just like, hell yeah, you know.
And
Also,
Scott had never rapped before, by the way. That was
yeah,
he learned how to rap just for this role.
that's amazing. That's amazing. The music, where did the music come from?
I
The
mean,
songs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of different music in it, right? I'm just a huge music fan. You can see my record collection over there, and whatever. But music is very important to everything I do. I did a lot of music videos, and just so I was always, of course, another thing I sort of was attracted to about the Juggalo culture is that it is based around music and the specific type of music. And so it was always like multiple things, right? There's the songs so we'll start with like their music, right? Like with Trey and Silas's music, the Diabolical Deadbeats or the, Blood Wolf Clan or whatever. Um, uh, you know, that was another thing where we ended up having to switch gears, and ended up with working with these guys, Suicide and Honest Bill, who are two Juggalo friends. Because again, I wanted to have Juggalos involved in that kind of part of it, because I was like, who else is going to make more authentic music than actual Juggalo music, rappers. And they came to me through a friend, Chris Fabritz, who is also known as Mankini, and he's in the movie at the end, and we talk about Mankini. He introduced us, and yeah, they did great beats, and we kind of like Tim. I would give Tim a lot of credit for a lot of the raps that he wrote in there, because a lot of those raps are Tim's. But that was kind of that, and it was like that was just kind of had to be part of their like character, and it was kind of a driving force to get us towards the gathering, even though, of course, as they get off the off ramp, it becomes about something else, and they find something even greater than just that. But the rest then. As far as some of the like song selections, like the songs that we actually used from other artists, of course, we had to have at least one Insane Clown Posse song and Miracle. Even though we asked about trying to get a couple of them, we could only afford one. And of course, Miracles was so much of what it was about. So it was just like I had to have it. And we'd written it into the script, and they were really gracious and worked with us, and they're awesome. And so we ended up being able to get Miracles, and then of course the incredible cover at the end that my composer Rick Nelson did, and many and his the other thing. I'll detract and talk about Rick Nelson real quick. So he did all the score, and he and I had worked together before, and I given him some like sound alikes. I really wanted him to make it sound like this, particularly this Aphex Twin album, Drugs. But like that album is like half and half. It's either like really beautiful acoustic instruments, or it's very loud Aphex Twin kind of stuff as well. But it was all that beautiful acoustic stuff that I had always been attracted to. So he based the score off of that, and it was this very like minimal, it was like banging on the back of piano strings, and like he's really brilliant. So he did an incredible job. And then we also were able to reach out to Ouija Mac, who's another big Juggalo musician, who's kind of like the next generation behind Insane Clown Posse. He's kind of the next in line on Psychopathic and with that fan base. And he's because we ended up using his music in the movie. We ended up doing two songs of his, and then he's become and since then become a big fan of the movie. We become friends. He's an awesome dude, and it's been really great. And then we were able to get like Acid Bath, which is a kind of was like a huge get for us, and apparently we're the first movie to ever license an Acid Bath song for a movie. They're like this metal band from here down here in Homa. And then as the Bats started, they actually are getting together again. They've been broken up forever, but they're getting together and playing shows again. And we like to think that it was because we put them in the movie and they all started talking again. So that's our hope.
It's awesome.
But yeah,
Yeah. The movie bringing people together. You know.
yeah.
Yeah, the music was definitely something I walked away from after at the end, like realizing like, oh, it didn't come across as like just ICP, just Juggalo, music. Like
Mm.
there was more than a few times where I'm watching, I'm like, wait, who is this? Like I need to go back and figure out who this is, afterwards.
Well, thank you.
And yeah, it was great, and the cover of Miracles is wonderful.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, none of these songs are anything I'm familiar with. If there is a demographic, I would say like this movie wasn't targeted towards me, but I'm glad I watched it just exposing myself to that music. It doesn't sound too dissimilar than to like some of the trap beats that you
Mhm.
hear like on today's the radio station, but the music is very much a character itself. And surprisingly, like, you see the poster and you're like, oh, it's about Juggalo life, probably. And it's not that at all. This is kind of maybe a weird pull, but there's a line from Lois and Clark, The Adventures of Superman from back in the day. There's an episode where Clark says something to the effect of like, you know, um, I'm Clark, like Superman's who I can be. It's kind of like what Silas says, well, that's like being trans is a detail, but I'm still Silas. It's kind of that, and what I love about it is like they're just regular people, like they could be from any background at all, and that's what I love about it. So it comes down to like the human elements uh and their dynamic is kind of what drew me in. I think everyone should have a Trey or a Silas BFF, that will ride with you,
Yeah.
for real. I mean, the shit that they go through. If you can talk about you mentioned Eden, she is great, and just like her and Brian, aka Scarecrow's um kind of family dynamic. If you could talk about like the inspiration for that, because that's I mentioned in my brief review today that it goes sideways, and not to mean in a negative way. It's just this movie is so unpredictable, but I was in it the entire time, engaged.
Well, no, well, good. Yeah, I mean, I don't know anyone who has forced their sister to drink their breast milk. So,
That was such a great setup too. So when she poured it on him later, I'm like, oh, because we know what that is.
yeah,
And that it's like going to heal his legs. So like
yeah,
this is
exactly.
all like just to help to walk in.
This is all it takes. There are some people who do believe that like drinking breast milk is like good for like regenerative like powers. It's pretty, weird. I mean, it's funny. There's a ton of research put into this movie. Like I'll tell you
Yeah.
that. Even like, and then it goes down to even like the breast milk thing, stuff. And again, bodybuilders, some people like drink breast milk. Like it was all that those like details were put in there. I mean, the thing with uh, it was always like it kind of like it became about family and it became about what can we because we had all these other different versions of the script. Like originally it was a party, they go to a party that Scarecrow's having, and there's two girls that they like meet and they both hang out with and whatever, and they're not related to Scarecrow. It's like something else. That was like the original version of the script. So like when we like changed it and got to like be one girl and it be the sister of Scarecrow, it really became about that thing about, trying to continue to make the metaphor for or the comparison of the conversation about family, just make it more and more about it. And so what we wanted something that was like a traumatic, melodramatic sort of element of people who've been through this because in my experience when I talk to juggalos, I mean there are lots of juggalos who live absolutely normal lives and loving families, but there are a lot of them who have a lot of trauma in their lives too. And I would say that was something that was I found very common as I spoke to people, and I found it to be something that was, a rich sort of piece of, and again, to tell the story of it's not about your blood family, it's about your chosen family. And since that's what the film is, it felt natural for her to be, rejecting and running away from her blood family. And so, with Scarecrow is always this guy who, like, it's funny because Jared always says, whenever we were like reading the script, like, and it was always like my favorite line too of Scarecrow's is when he's like, "You're so fucking hardcore, Scarecrow," and like when he's eating the finger or whatever. And so the fact that he like, that like that just like encapsulates who he is, right? He like thinks he's so cool, but he's not. He's a big baby, and he's this big like, and it's kind of like just all the like evils of sort of, manipulative sort of men. But I think also too, Jared brings such a humanity to it. Even though he's such an evil psycho piece of shit, Jared is so like likable, and he has like such a turn at the end. And it's one of those things we talk about, that like when he first was kind of like bringing it like this, like it was like he's like being a big baby, which is just really, really fun. So this again, it wasn't really like there wasn't necessarily like real life's exact situations that we were talking about, but we're twisted, sick minds, and so we're gonna take it to fucking things where it's gonna be about like, because the breast milk thing to us was something that was about like control, and like what was the sort of like how to like basically keep this like keep her in, it was just like the worst thing that somebody could do in so many ways. But in the end, the fact is she's so maternal, and she's literally still like able to breastfeed. So when this baby comes in, it's like the perfect like, answer to her prayers. And what she's really like seeking is that just kind of conclusion so that she can feel and make her own family. And that's really what she does. So yeah, so it's like I said, but the finger cutting thing, that's one of the real events that we are basing on, right? Like the finger cutting thing actually happened. Um, there was a juggalo in like I think Wisconsin who went by like Bloody Ruckus, and still goes by Bloody Ruckus. And he and some friends got together, and they were all like having a good time and getting messed up. And they wanted to like do some cult shit. And like the girl who was there was like, "Hey, cut my finger off." And they were like, "Are you real for real?" And she was like, "Yeah, do it, do it." And so she wanted to do it, and they did it. And it really weird and like bogus, because the guy Bloody Ruckus who did it ended up like going to jail for like because of some like laws about body modification. And it's like he did it willingly, and it's like some bullshit. Like he ended up spending time in jail. So anyways, keep your laws off our body. If we want to cut off our fingers, let's go ahead and we can do it. It's a choice. It's our choice. It's like that's the thing.
Right.
But what's wild is, sorry, was when the film first came out, as a Juggalo reached out to me on Instagram, and was like, I was one of the guys at that party, and that's my friends. He's like, "Do you want to see the videos?" And so he sent me the videos, so they're in my inbox.
That's amazing. Oh wow. Yeah, yeah, you were wrong about this being all researched. You talked about the baby. That must have been challenging because, even if it's done right, it can look bad. And you guys pulled it off. Like, I think it looks way better than the baby in American Sniper. Anybody
Oh,
just see that? Like that's
the baby in American Sniper looks terrible.
Let's say this one moves.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
a couple I'll talk about the baby real quick. So first, the prosthetic baby. We were able to work with a guy named Carlos Savant, who, since I've been a gaffer, like I had a lot of really great favors to ask. So one reason why the movie looks so professional is a lot of my really amazing professional friends came out and did favors for me, and worked for well below their normal whatever. But we're friends. And so Carlos Savant, who's done quite a lot when you look him up, and he did a lot of the Blumhouse stuff that was here. He's been around. He's done tons of special effects, and he like this was a gag that he always wanted to do, right? The kind of frontier surgery of a baby is like, as a special effects guy, it's kind of a thing you want to do, right? You want to have it on your reel, and so it was a weird combination of things. Like I reached out to another special effects makeup friend and just like asked randomly, like, "Hey, do you know where I could get like a belly like that I could cut into?" And he was like, "As a matter of fact, we made one for this other movie, but we didn't use it, and I'll sell it to you for $200, even though it cost $3,500 to make." And I'm like, "Yes, sir." And so we got like the kind of outer thing that was already pre-made. And so then Carlos made the, little dirty bastard baby, and he really wanted to he was really excited about it, and put the hair in and did all the great stuff. And he then put it in like this bag, and then inside the stomach. And we shot that with three cameras. We had like one looking down, and one like on profile, and like one really super tight to get really super tight details. And with the three cameras, we basically, because we only had one take at it, one shot at it, And it was like we basically, cut into it and did it all in the sort of stages. But then we mixed it with, of course, shots of the real baby. And it really helps if you have a baby in your movie. It helps to cast an actor as your lead actor whose wife is 6 months pregnant, as I did. So John Oswald's baby is the baby that we use in the film. So as soon as we wrapped production on the reshoots, John's wife had just had a baby, so my nephew and I drove from New Orleans to Austin, Texas, and like filmed John holding his baby in front of his, in front of like in a garage, and we basically just like lit it so it looked right. And it came out, and now it's great in magical movies.
Yeah,
Nepo
it looks
babies,
amazing.
every movie.
That's right, Tyler. That's right.
Yeah, I love that just right before we get to that scene out in the forest, one of the most incredible shots is Trey and Silas in the back of that police cruiser, and the blue lights, just looks like that thin line. And if you talk about setting up that shot, it's one that just really stuck with me. That one and the framing uh, of Trey holding the camera when he was like, "I'm not gonna be what was it, the table sex like
Sex table.
the sex table." Yeah, that one. Yeah, I love the framing of that. It's just again beautifully shot.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I also work as a cinematographer as well. I'm actually a cinematography professor now over at
Mm,
Loyola down here. So photography has always been something that I've done, but I knew that I wanted when I made my film. I had done a short film and I shot and directed it, and I was just not as ecstatic about the results because I think I was just too. It's so much to do, and I wasn't as focused on the things that I wanted to. So. I knew when I was time to shoot my feature that I really wanted to have someone else be the DP, and I thought and knew that my friend Bron Moy was one of the most talented people I knew, and Bron and I. Have known each other a long time. He used to be a set dresser, and so when I was a gaffer, we would work together. And I knew he got into camera, so I also knew like we could kind of talk about things in a more like there wouldn't be this necessarily like there wouldn't be any tension like about us talking about it or me making suggestions that I knew I wanted. But I was so pleased. I mean, Braun did such an amazing job. It brought so much of himself to it, and it really the film looks that way, because of us working together. And it was really just so amazing what he brought to it. So the two shots you're talking about in the back of the cop car, that was always something I knew that we wanted to do. It was like always kind of the only shot for that scene of them getting in the, getting arrested and taken away. And it was just what we did was we mounted the camera on the back of the cop car and basically just, ratchet strap the hell out of it and like put it on, some things and put our wide lens on and just like shot it all through the back. And I just always love a like one take thing like that. And it works all well together because again, the song, right? The Evil Friend song, which is from actually from Dax Riggs, who's a singer of Acid Bath, which again, that whole thing. Another song that I found in the editing process and was obsessed with and was like, oh, this has to be in the movie. So it was always like it was one of those things that I kind of always knew that was how I wanted to shoot that scene. Maybe not always, but I mean, at a certain point when I started like kind of planning it out in my head, I was like, oh, this is what we're going to do. And I agree, it is one of my absolute favorite shots in the film as well. I think it just says so much. And we just, it just excites me. Cinema can be so exciting when you don't when we put so much of ourselves into it. I think it's just so much more when you're not seeing everything and you're imagining things. Like I think that's the thing is it's so magical about movies is how it, works your imagination. And then for the shot you're talking about the camera, that's again one of those things that to me was always about like how I guess there's a part of it where I'm like trying to put the lens on myself, if you will, of feeling like I'm sort of behind the camera, right? Kind of like a little bit of it was, and that was again one of those shots that was always kind of written in the script, right? There was like in the script that like he raises the camera and covers one eye, like it's always like planned to be exactly kind of like that. And I think I love that moment too because I at least the way I've experienced it in theaters when I watched it, I think everyone thinks something else is going to happen, right? They start to make out, and he gives this camera, and like you kind of think you're about to go into this, like maybe pornographic, maybe something like you don't know what's going, I mean, like, and then it becomes this kind of other moment about real beauty and real love, and I always am very excited about how that kind of like kind of works on people.
Yeah, it's a great moment. I can see like people having issues with the pacing if they had a certain expectation of the film, but again, just kind of going in blind, not knowing what to expect, and just taking it all in. I was really engaged, and especially like with Eden, you really sympathize with that character. I think anybody can understand. I'm forgetting the line, but she's talking about how she kind of uh you know how do I say this? I have my son in the room, so I'm trying to be careful with some of the dialogue
Some of the
here.
language is a little
Yes,
foul.
yes. So when she
You
kind
boys
of
want to
gives like
fuck?
Silas and Trey this opportunity here, and then they kind of turn her. Well, she reads it as them turning her down, but she just says something like, I just wanted to like feel loved for a moment or something like that. I think anybody can understand that, no matter what the situation. So I did reach out to you yesterday, asked you a question, and then you said you would leave it to me to to my interpretation or something. I could not figure it out, but the color blue is all over the place. Tyler, did you pick up on that at all? Like
Uh,
like the drink Silas is drinking his blue at the gravesite, and the blue van, blue lights on the cruiser, which is but inside Scarecrow's trailer, there's a lot of blue hues. Blue socks on Trey. I think a lot of vehicles actually the Scarecrow's yard is also blue. So I don't know if that's just coincidence, but it just really stuck out, and so that's why I had to ask. I knew it
Of
was just like
course.
really early on. Yeah,
No, I look, and if I were to answer, then I feel like I'd ruin the mystery for you. And
yeah,
I know that's like sounds like such a cop out, but I genuinely think that like mystery is just so much better than not. I don't know. The older I get, the more I'm like, nah, don't tell me. You know what I mean? Like, let
yeah.
me think. But I mean, I will tell you if you really want
No,
to know.
yes, please. But because I was like, is it grief? I don't know. Is it? I was trying to figure it out, but the scenes that where I'm like, oh, there's blue. I'm trying to see if there's any sort of connection or pattern, and nothing was coming to me last night, unfortunately.
what?
There really is not like
What,
any
Tyler? Did you
specific.
have a guess?
Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, I was going to say I have a question that might clear it up. What's your favorite flavor of Fago?
Oh, there you go. Yes, good one. I, it's weird. Like, I mean, cotton candy is like I don't really like to drink it because it is insane. It's like
Yeah.
just like sugar, and it's like the most sugar you've ever had. But I will say there's a couple of really good Juggalo mixologists who live in New Orleans, come to think, and they actually go to the gathering and they do like little mixed drinks that are really good. And they use the cotton candy. They actually turn into something that's like really delicious. But I mean, I guess Rock and Rye is kind of like the like classic one, that I like. But that's more of that doesn't give you a color. But maybe the cotton candy is kind of bluish. But truth be told, I mean, no, I just like blue. It was like the blue van is like what it was. And I think it's just a matter of like, but again, like. It wasn't specific, but I wouldn't say that it isn't a part of something. I think that every color has a place and has some evocation. I mean, Blue Velvet is a very much a favorite film of mine, and I certainly was I David Lynch is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers, and Wild at Heart is probably like the biggest influence on this film. My dog, her name's Lula, named after that. So, I mean, I guess blue is always with Blue Velvet. I guess I've always felt like it's a little something, but wouldn't say it was a conscious thing that I did going in. I think, you just pick things and you just kind of go with them.
Mhm. I mentioned in
Does that
my
ruin does
kind
that
of
ruin the mystery for you?
no, not at all. Like just that that it wasn't just a coincidence that I just saw it for for no reason. Um,
No, but I mean, like I said, I think it's really cool that you attach something to that. And I think that's what I mean is that I think like that's valid for you. You experience that, and that's awesome. And that's what
yeah,
I'm saying that like I don't it's whether I intended it or not. It's like one of the weirdest things, you make a piece of art and you realize you're like, it's no longer mine. Do you know what I mean? And it
yeah,
really isn't like, and that's cool as fuck. Like that it's like
right.
other, it's now your experience. You watch it and you had an experience. I can't take that experience from you. Yes, I crafted that experience based off of what I wanted to feel or what I was, but it was to please me. And and it's just, I think that art, the experience of watching something is so subjective in that way. That, I just think it's so cool. It's such a great,
Oh
cool
yeah.
thing. Yeah. Sorry, I
And
didn't
that's
mean
just
to
art.
interrupt.
No, 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 no. But, music, film, it's all up to interpretation. So, because at first I thought, oh, maybe visually, it's kind of funny, or it just shows up better on screen when Cyrus is like, Ninja, what? He spits out the drink. I was like, yeah, you can see that, and it's funny. I love their vernacular. I love the way they speak. You said that's a little bit of in you how you speak, or is there? How did you guys find Silas and Trey's voice?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say I speak necessarily like that. I mean, I did.
You don't talk about buttholes all the time.
My conversations about holes are limited. Um, um, I grew up making hip hop music and was around a lot of, I definitely like was in that world, so I definitely heard a lot of that. And I certainly spoke to a lot of juggalos as well. And so there was a lot of that, but it really, when it came down to it, I think it was just that it was, I think one of my writing tips that I like to do, and I tell my students is like, think of like like yourself, you're one of the voices, and the other voice is like pick one of your friends, your aunt, like somebody who like has a distinct way of talking, and sort of pick them and sort of take them and their colloquialisms and their little things and make them the other character. Because I think that that's kind of like, and then again, we just kind of kept, we would take those things and just kind of keep working it until it sounded more and more like juggalos who were in this time, and they were having a good time and going to the gathering. So it was one of those things that kind of kept working. But again, a lot of conversations with juggalos and my time, because I went to the gathering in 2021 and filmed the gathering, and that's where all the footage from the gathering comes from. And I really got to like that was such an important step for me because I really got to know a lot of juggalos and became really close friends with a lot of them. And I just spent a lot of time around them and really like started to bring, hear a lot of the specific ways they would say stuff. And so it just kind of kept, putting that in there. And it really comes out, and also just too, I mean, my co-writer Tim and I, I think having two people writing helps sometimes too, because you have two voices within that. So it makes it sound a little bit more, because everybody writes in their own voice to begin with, right? It's just how it works. But as you kind of go, and especially as you start like kind of reading it out loud, you kind of like distinguish those different voices, and you're like, oh, this is, okay. And then you hear things, and you just, writing is rewriting. So I think it's that. But it was, and true, they as actors brought so much to it because their chemistry is so amazing, and they both love the script so much that they took what we had written and really embodied it, and then really kind of built from it, and would improv little bits here and there, but like most of it was like actually the way it was written. But I think they just both loved it so much that the way they performed it made it come off even more natural too.
Earlier, I kind of referenced Dumb and Dumber, and to kind of take it back to that diner scene. There's just this little touch that you guys did that really stood out to me because it just added more layers to Silas. And let's just call it salt, right? He poured a little bit of salt on his pizza. Could you talk about the idea of that? Because I was just like, that's a nice touch because that kind of sets up like, oh, he's got stuff on him, a bag full of stuff. So it didn't come out of nowhere. And that's the other thing, it's so your guys' script is so well crafted that everything pays off. Like Tyler mentioned it like being a comedy, I believe, and so I thought I was coming in to a comedy. I think it's more dramedy, but I feel it's more of a drama. And the funny stuff is not meant to be funny. It just happens to be funny. You know, like after Gavin gets shot, he's just like, "Oh my fucking shirt" or whatever. It's like, well, because he probably just changed it after from getting milk spilt on it earlier. And so, like in that moment, that character probably would say that in real life, even though he's, And so I appreciate those like moments of levity, where you're just not expecting it, but it's too funny not to laugh. Like Jared's allegedly out of nowhere.
No, I mean I think, stylistically, it's kind of just again who Tim and I are and the films that we really love. I mean, I think my favorite films are the ones that you are really kind of hard to define specifically in a genre and are cross-genre type of films. And I think that, I think Off Ramp it is absolutely funny, and I would like it was also one of those things that when we first started making it, everybody who read it and who was kind of helping on the production thought it was just a comedy, and I'm like, no, it's funny, but it's a drama. Like we need to make the film, as honestly as we can and let the humor just be what it is. And I think it was Hitchcock or someone much smarter than I am said. When you direct a comedy, direct it like a drama, and when you direct a drama, direct it like a comedy. And I think what he's saying is that if the actor is trying to be funny, it's not funny. But if
Mm.
they are being earnest, then it is very funny, very often very funny. And we also like kind of just laughing at the like situation and how things work out as opposed to kind of being told when to laugh. And I think that, it is interesting because the film definitely started as more of a comedy. And in fact, we probably were like doing the wrong thing at first and kind of laughing at juggalos to begin with in the early versions of the script. But as we kept working on it and kept like exploring and then got to know these folks, we realized that was like, dead wrong. And the idea really was that like if we could, the more we can be genuine about these folks and just let the moments be funny for what they are, um, just because juggalos are funny, they're clowns. I mean, it's like it's that they're in, and I said my buddy, some of my juggalo buddies say they're in on the joke, like they get it, they get that it's funny, and it's okay. That's the whole point. Like they're clowns, they're wicked clowns, whatever. But I think that is the truth. It was always this kind of struggle to like, how do we balance these tones? And there's a number of movies that I think do it really well. And one that like really was inspiring to me was one called Seven Beauties, by Lena Wertmuller. It's like a Italian film from the 70s. And it's like simultaneously so moving and so funny and so off the wall. And, I think some of the Coen brothers, Raising Arizona was a really, really big influence on this movie as well. And, Coen brothers balance, they're funny but dramatic. I mean, I think Raising Arizona still would make me cry and laugh. Like, I think I'd feel those same kind of feelings. And so we just really wanted to kind of like do that. We weren't really sure that it would work. We were kind of like, is this going to work? It's like all these tones. And I think that, I think it doesn't work for some people. I think there's certainly like when people don't like the film, I think that's one thing that they don't necessarily, because I think some people just want to kind of, shut off and just kind of see a movie or whatever and it be like what they expect. But I feel quite a lot of when people tell me that the movie was not what they expected, I take that as a compliment.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's not at all. It's like I said, it's unpredictable, and um, I just thought you guys balanced it very, very well. You have like the voiceovers, which can probably turn some people off, but I appreciated those, just to kind of like get us out of the, what's going on right now, kind of reset and this, next scene kind of thing. Um, the gentleman at the store in the beginning, and then like the lady at the pharmacy. Can you talk about those two characters? Because they kind of bookend with the first one last time we see Trey, if I'm not mistaken. Well, I guess not the first time we see Trey, but just they're bits of a bookend, and I just love that line about like where the man he looks off to the side and it's just like I loathe clowns or whatever. And I just started laughing because again, it wasn't something I expected it. And so I just then when he said clowns, I started thinking about Sweet Tooth, Twisted Metal, the look of juggalos and stuff. But then the lady sees him later on, he's got the face painted, but blood all over, and he's a mess. And she's not judging. She just wants to make sure he's okay. And both times he's in a good mood.
Yeah, that's great. You're right. They are kind of bookended scenes. I think those scenes both are like about, kind of seeing juggalos out in the sort of everyday world, right? And you have those kind of normal exchanges or normal exchanges with folks, but I think we've all been there where you have these moments of weird conversation and connection with strangers in a commercial setting like that. And it's in the South too, and it's like that's just kind of like we wanted to kind of like give us some great characters. Both of those parts are played by really fantastic local actors down here. The first one is Viral, is the character's name, is played by David Jensen, who is a longtime friend of mine. I shot him in a movie. I was a DP of a movie called King of New Orleans that he starred in. But David has been around forever. He's one of the like biggest working actors in New Orleans, and he was one of Steven Soderbergh's friends. Was in a number of Steven Soderbergh movies, particularly specifically one called Schizopolis. He plays an amazing character called Elmo Oxygen in Schizopolis. If you've never seen it, strong recommend.
Okay.
And I always like loved that movie and was so into it. And anyway, so Dave Jensen, Dave was also in my short film Mariah. Dave's like somebody I just care for deeply. I think he's so talented and such a amazing human being. So I was always going to put Dave in my movie. He'll probably be in my next one. Like I think Dave will be in if I can put him in every movie I ever can. And that character in the gas station was always there, even from the short film. So, the short film that I originally wrote, which was like 10 or 15 pages or something, it had the gas station attendant, and some of those jokes like had been there from the beginning. So that was always that was also I think the thing about that is that that's also one of those things about being a Southerner where you feel out of place in this other space too, right? He's got the Confederate flags around, and it's like
Mm.
there's like definitely a strong racism implication with that character, and it's one of those things that for myself growing up in the South, you always feel like this really weird feeling of being uncomfortable, even though I'm a white person, to be around this thing that's so filled with hate that I can disagree with so much. And it's always been that thing that we've seen as we grow up, and like it makes you feel even more like an other. And I think that, people don't really know, like who aren't from the South don't really understand that we grew up with this thing where people have the Confederate flags on their trucks and they like are really like, and you're just like, what is wrong with you? You people are like, this is the most awful thing. And, I've always thought that way. And I've always thought that it's such a strange thing to sort of be around. And it is a very odd and uncomfortable thing. And like, and especially like also being a white guy, like them being like, oh, well, you're okay, you're a white guy, but me being like, fuck you. And I think that was something that was really important for us to talk about with the kind of the South, and being an other around that, and how being a juggalo and is even an other amongst others. And then at the end, we run into the character's name is Destiny,
Destiny, yeah.
and yeah, and of course, there's some implications there, but it's played by the wonderful Rhonda Dents, who is another incredible working actor down here in New Orleans, who have been on many, many TV shows. And yeah, I think it was important at that time to also show the sort of care that, like, I know myself, I go into my pharmacy, and like my particular pharmacy has this woman who's, she and I just, she's always checking in on me, and she's always like, you all right, baby? Like that kind of stuff, just like and that's a very Southern thing too, that like a lot of, older women in New Orleans will just call someone baby who's younger than them. So that was like something that I can, again, was just like somebody who I felt like is a real person that I've kind of interacted with in my daily life. And again, it's like such a great time to bring back some callbacks, I mean, I do believe in nonsense. It's just I do prefer nonsense. I mean,
Yeah. Tyler, I got a couple more questions as we get ready to wrap up here. If you want to
I
ask some
mean,
more.
we've kind of covered all the questions that I had.
Okay.
But yeah, the I wanted to say, like you kind of said that when you first started writing it, you were may have been more on the side of like making fun, of the Juggalos. And me going into it, I was assuming this is going to be, a funny movie where like normal the Juggalos are kind of the punchline. Um, and it doesn't take long like into the for the movie to like really convince you that like no, they're like you're not here to laugh at them, you're not here to just like say, oh, it's funny you guys put on face paint. They know that it's ridiculous, but the movie isn't trying to I kind of said in my review, like force you into like thinking about them one way. It's just presents it, here they are, and uh hope that you like them, and I think most people will. But I think a lot of people, like with it being on Tubi now, you're probably going to see a lot of people that go into it just seeing the face paint, and thinking it'll be something to laugh at. And I hope that I think if they stick with it, that's not going to.
Well,
The,
thank you very much. No, I hope you're right. I think, I think it's one of those movies that if you just kind of give it the time and keep your open mind about it, then I think they will get there. And yeah, a lot of people have told me things like it's like sort of like it's a movie that's sort of better than its poster. Not that the poster isn't great in what it is. It's just that no matter what it is, you're going to see two juggalos on a road trip. That's what the movie is. And yeah, I think a lot of people think that's what they're just, it is going to be just that. And that's what I mean too, that I feel so pleasantly. Feel so pleased when people are pleasantly surprised by it. I think it does mean you have to be open-minded. Y'all watch a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? Y'all are open-minded. And like and like I'm really grateful for all those folks who are open to kind of like a movie taking you a place that you don't expect, because that to me is what I enjoy the most. I mean, I love watching a movie where at the beginning I don't know what's going to happen at the end, and then when I get to the end I'm like, man, I did not expect that to be the thing that I happen, and that's great. When I get into and watch a movie and I'm like, well, everything happened that I expected, I'm like, okay, and I just, I fall asleep and whatever. So thank you for that, and I do hope that people give it the chance. I do. It's one of those things that's kind of, we've seen that it does have a limited, people are kind of limited in their sort of, first reaction to it. But, this is always going to be a cult movie, I think, no matter what it was going to be. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's any world where it isn't. And that's fine. Those are some of my favorite movies. And that's the section I lived in the home video store. There's no question. So I'm welcome to be there. I love that, and I love our genre crowds too. We played a lot of great genre festivals. I found a lot of really awesome people and able to connect with people. And I think truly too, I think the film really it's like it's kind of for juggalos, but it's also really a lot for everybody else too. It really is for people to see maybe their own lives and how they could be like, because it's like, can you be nicer? Can you be kinder? Can you be more accepting? Can you be more loving? Like, can you be a better friend, brother, like, can you do that? I think that's a good thing for us all to kind of like ask ourselves. The greatest compliment I've gotten from this film was after one of the screenings here at New Orleans Film Festival, like our second like public screening. It was a huge response, and this young man came up to me and said, after watching this film makes me want to be a nicer person. And I was like, what can you say to that?
Amazing. It's amazing. It's such a clever film, and you don't try to beat us over the head with anything at all. Like we briefly talked about, or you briefly talked about, like the having like the Confederate flag, in that store, and it's not behind the gas attendant; it's behind Trey. And so even the placement of that, it kind of if you notice it, you're like, huh. Well, now that's interesting. Well, we are in the South. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I feel putting it, behind the register, you're like, it's a little overt, and it's like, well, clearly he is, and it's just that thing. So it made me kind of like question. I was like, oh, that's an interesting placement. I wonder what that's about. You know, so I just love all of the little details make me think a little bit more, you know. And so, one of the other things that I'd love to hear about, I think one of the best performances is, and pardon me because I don't have the credits up in front of me, but Officer Randy Cox.
Oh yes,
Um,
absolutely.
he is amazing in the beginning, and then seeing him tripping on LSD later on, I just thought it was a fantastic performance. I felt like you guys gave him the LSD. LSD. I don't know, but like I think the wrong casting could have made it over the top, and he just played it in such a way where like you just buy it, you know, and it doesn't come off like silly at all. It's funny as all hell, but if you can please talk about the
Absolutely.
idea, yes.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you. You know, he'll love to hear that. That's he's played by Miles Doliak, who is my good friend, and actually he's the chair of the film department that I work at now at Loyola, and he's also a filmmaker, and I have shot his films as well, and also a very talented actor. He's been in a lot of things, you know, Renfield and The Purge, and you know,
Oh,
he's also a successful working actor as well. And yeah, Miles is from South Mississippi. He's from like Hattiesburg, and
mm,
so he, you know, has a lot of experience with, you know, Mississippi cops, and so he really knows what that's all about. The funny part is that he's never done psychedelics in his life. And when we cast him because we've been friends and like I know him, you know what I mean? Like it was, and so I was like, when I cast him, I was like, "Do you want to come over and eat some mushrooms so you know what you're getting into?" And he was like, "No, I'm good." I'm like, "Okay, well, watch
missing
some
out.
YouTube." I was like, "Well, listen, yeah, you're missing out, and also watch some YouTube videos, and you know." And then I was like, one of my main directions to him about being on like that much LSD, because if you know this, I was like, "You are always thinking about your jaw." I was
Yeah.
like, you're always thinking about your jaw. I was like, always. It's just you cannot. I was in like we would do a take, and I'd be like afterwards, I'd be like jaw, and he'd be like, oh yeah, yeah, you know. And so he's like, you know, because that's the thing is like if you've ever done that much LSD, you know that you're like you move your jaw around like crazy. You're just always like thinking about your jaw. It's whatever. But yeah, I think you know. I mean, Randy's one of those characters that I think you know he has such a great turn, right? You know, we all love to see the bad guy turn and then get killed. You know what I mean? We love that. It's such a great like character device, I think, and it worked so well because you know, yet another thing we wanted to talk about was you know obviously was cops and power and the sort of way that the you know police run things in the South and the way that white male power and privilege sort of like rules the South. And, you know, while we wanted to, you know, we wanted to show a bit of a dichotomy. On the one hand, there's, you know, Gavin Reed Diamond, who's the, you know, worst person in the world. And, and, you know, Randy Cox, who's like, you know, doing his job, doing what he, you know, having to do what he has to do to survive. And then having an epiphany and starting to realize through this act that may have been started as an act of sort of violence but then the sort of, you know, the kind of thing that I think we all, you know, if you've ever done psychedelics, one of the things that it's like the world would be a better place if just everybody just did psychedelics at least once, and everybody just kind of like saw that, like, you know, it's just leave everybody else alone, like just shut up. Yeah. So yeah, so Miles did an incredible job and is one of my favorite parts of it. And you know, it's funny because I always forget when I watch it with a crowd, I always forget that like they don't know that Randy Cox is coming back, you know. And so when he comes back at the end, I remember from the first times watching it in a theater, like having people like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh yes, that's so great," you know, because you forget.
Yeah, you really do. And you know, like when Officer Cox pulls them over, I'm so rooting for these two to go on their trip and get to the gathering. And then once Silas is like after he chokes him out and Silas is standing there with the gun, like I'm really like, don't do that. What are you doing? Your boy just got out of prison. You're about to shoot this man, and then it's like I'm like, oh my God. So that's how unpredictable this is, and I just loved it for that. And
Thank you,
so
thank you,
yeah, so well done.
thank you very
Uh,
much.
Nathan, you've been so gracious with your time. We both enjoyed your film so much. I can't wait to watch it again. And
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
I have so many great moments. Tyler, any last questions before we let Nathan go?
Um, what country is your Blue Velvet poster from?
It is from Poland.
Okay.
My Blue Velvet poster is from Poland. Our world premiere for Off Ramp was in Warsaw, Poland, at a film festival
Ooh,
called Splat, which is a genre horror festival in Warsaw, and is an incredible time. I absolutely loved my time in Warsaw. Beautiful country, really cool, and shout out to Monica at Splat, very cool festival. I was very interesting because I remember going to see my film in Warsaw, Poland, and I was like, how is this movie going to translate to the Polish audience, both literally and figuratively? Because how are the words going to be translated? Because it's such like there's so much wordplay and so
mhm.
many like
Yeah.
weird references. And then I was like, and also how are people going to kind of get it? Funny story enough, I did. There are actually I had my buddy Scotty D, who's a juggalo. I was like, when I was going over there, I was like, "Are there any Polish juggalos that you know?" He goes, "As a matter of fact, there are." And so he hooked me up with two Polish juggalos, and I was able to get them tickets, and they came in and saw the film, and they were really excited about it. And really loved it, and they were nervous too. They were like, I don't know, I'm nervous, I don't know if it's going to be any good. And afterwards they were like, oh, we loved it. So yeah, that was really cool. So that's where so Warsaw, Poland, shout out to there. And that's where my poster's from.
Awesome.
All right. And if you welcome the interaction, if people want to give you a follow or reach out to you on social media, if you want to give those plugs and anything you'd like to promote that's in the works, if you want people to kind of keep an eye out for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, I'm on Instagram at Damn Nathan, and the film is Off Ramp Film on Instagram, also on Facebook, everywhere basically Off Ramp Film. If you search Off Ramp Film, you'll find it. Website is offrampfilm.com. We have merchandise there. We're streaming on Tubi now for free. Please check it out. And we're very excited. Please, check it out. I do answer DMs, if I can in a timely manner. That's how we're chatting right now, and I love to hear from people who feel strongly towards the movie. It's such a joy to be able to share something like that. We're working on some new things. Tim and I have written like we're on our third script since Off Ramp. We're trying to raise some budgets and make some things happen. Jared Bankins is certainly going to be a big part of it going forward, as well as all the rest of my cast and crew who we love. But Jared and I have just been talking a lot. We hang out a lot. We're good buddies. And so we've been really dying to kind of like do something kind of like longer form together. So that's something that we're really looking to do soon. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, just reach out. Whoop whoop. The carnival provides y'all. Take a look. And thank y'all so much for having me.